The year was 1941. Across the Pacific and European waters, steel giants that had ruled the seas for decades were about to face their final judgment. These weren't just ships. They were floating fortresses, symbols of national pride, vessels that entire empires had built their naval strategies around. But in the smoke and chaos of World War II, 5 catastrophic defeats would expose a brutal truth. The age of the battleship was dying, and those who refused to see it would pay the ultimate price in blood and steel. This is the story of 5 naval disasters that changed maritime warfare forever. 5 moments when admirals made decisions that sent thousands of sailors to watery graves. 5 battles where outdated thinking collided with modern reality, and reality won every single time. The death of Force Z, December 1941. Britain made a calculated gamble to protect Singapore and Malaya by sending Force Z, a powerful deterrent led by Admiral Sir Tom Phillips. His flagship was HMS Prince of Wales, a modern King George V-class battleship representing the pinnacle of British naval engineering. Alongside steamed HMS Repulse, an older battlecruiser, and 4 destroyers. Naval planners believed battleships operating beyond bomber range or with fighter cover could dominate any theater. They were catastrophically wrong. The British had miscalculated Japanese bomber range by hundreds of miles. Twin-engine bombers based in Indochina could easily reach Force Z's operating area. The Royal Air Force was stretched impossibly thin and unable to provide cover. On December 8th, just hours after Pearl Harbor, Admiral Phillips departed Singapore to intercept Japanese invasion convoys. He maintained strict radio silence and advanced without reconnaissance. The force simply vanished into the South China Sea. Japanese reconnaissance found them almost immediately. Vice Admiral Matsunaga commanded the 22nd Air Flotilla in Saigon. When reports came in of British capital ships without air cover, he scrambled 86 bombers and torpedo planes. December 10th dawned clear. Perfect killing weather. The first wave appeared around midday. What followed was a masterclass in coordinated aerial attack. High-altitude bombers drew defensive fire, while torpedo bombers skimmed low across the water from multiple angles. The first torpedo slammed into Repulse, followed rapidly by several more. Prince of Wales took a torpedo to her stern, jamming the rudder and destroying propeller shafts. She circled helplessly, unable to steer. At 12:33 p.m., Repulse rolled over and sank. 508 men went down with her. Prince of Wales fought for another 47 minutes before capsizing at 1:20 p.m. 327 sailors died, including Admiral Phillips, who went down with his flagship. About 840 total dead. 2 capital ships rested on the ocean floor within 72 hours of departure. Singapore fell 2 months later on February 15, 1942. The myth of European invincibility in Asia died alongside those ships. The lesson resonated through every naval headquarters worldwide. Battleships without air cover were floating coffins. The Java Sea catastrophe. February 1942. The Japanese military machine rolled through Southeast Asia with terrifying speed. The Dutch East Indies represented the final prize. Standing in their way was a hastily assembled multinational fleet under the American, British, Dutch-Australian command, mercifully shortened to ABDACOM. Dutch Rear Admiral Karel Doorman commanded this chaotic coalition. 4 different navies, 4 different command structures, 4 different tactical doctrines, all thrown together. His fleet included 2 heavy cruisers, HMS Exeter and USS Houston, 3 light cruisers and 9 destroyers. Against a conventional opponent, this would be formidable. The Japanese were anything but conventional. Vice Admiral Takagi commanded the invasion covering force with seamless professionalism. His ships had trained together for months. Most critically, they possessed the Type 93 Long Lance torpedo with 20-mile range and devastating warheads. February 27th, the fleets clashed north of Java. ABDACOM ships couldn't coordinate fire because they used different radio frequencies and systems. When Doorman ordered course changes, some ships received the signal, others didn't. Still others misinterpreted commands. The formation became a strung-out line of individual ships fighting separate engagements. The Japanese executed textbook tactics. Their fire control coordinated multiple ships targeting single enemies. HMS Exeter took a shell to her boiler room, knocking her speed to 15 knots. Destroyer HMS Electra charged the Japanese line and was blown apart. HNLMS Courtenaire took a long-lance torpedo and broke in half, sinking in minutes. As daylight faded, Admiral Dorman faced an impossible situation. Withdrawal to Australia was rational. Instead, driven by duty and perhaps pride, he ordered his remaining ships to continue searching for the invasion convoy. They sailed directly into a death trap. Around 11 p.m., operating in complete darkness without radar, they blundered into Japanese forces again. The Japanese, masters of night fighting with superior optics, picked them apart. A long lance found De Ruyter. The flagship erupted as her magazines detonated. Admiral Dorman went down with his ship. Minutes later, Java took multiple torpedoes and followed her sister to the bottom. USS Houston and HMS Perth escaped temporarily, but were caught and sunk 2 nights later in Sunda Strait. The butcher's bill was staggering. 5 warships sunk in the main battle, 2 more destroyed later. Approximately 2,300 sailors killed and complete collapse of Allied naval resistance. The Japanese landed unopposed on Java. The lessons were harsh. Multinational forces require extensive joint training and unified command. Superior numbers mean nothing without coordination. Once a battle is clearly lost, withdrawal to preserve forces isn't cowardice, but sound strategy. Savo Island disaster in the dark August 8, 1942, Guadalcanal. The first major American offensive had just begun. Marines captured the Japanese airfield, but remained vulnerable. The Allied screening force included 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 8 destroyers. The command situation was messy. Rear Admiral Victor Crutchley had been summoned to a conference, taking his flagship and leaving no clear unified command. This leadership vacuum would prove fatal. Vice Admiral Gunichi Mikawa raced south from Rabaul with 5 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and a destroyer. His plan was audaciously simple. Race in, hit hard, race out before dawn, brought American air power. His crews were extensively trained in night combat. Mikawa's force slipped past Allied pickets undetected. Radar contacts were dismissed as friendly forces or rain squalls. At 1:30 a.m. on August 9th, Japanese float planes dropped flares, silhouetting Allied ships perfectly. The slaughter began immediately. Japanese cruisers opened fire at point-blank range. USS Astoria was hit multiple times before her crew realized they were under attack. USS Quincy took a salvo into her bridge, killing Captain Moore and most command staff instantly. USS Vincennes was raked by shells and torpedoes. HMS Canberra steamed directly into the killing zone and took 24 hits in 2 minutes. The engagement lasted less than 40 minutes. By 2:16 a.m., Mikawa withdrew, having achieved one of the most lopsided victories in naval history. 4 heavy cruisers were sinking or crippled. Over 1,100 Allied sailors were dead or dying, nearly 700 more wounded. Savo Island was a catastrophic wake-up call. Absent leadership left ships without coordinated defense. Radar was poorly understood and improperly utilized. Ships maintained insufficient readiness with crews sleeping rather than on full alert. American night fighting doctrine was virtually non-existent. The disaster forced complete overhaul of procedures, radar integration, and command protocols. But for the sailors who died in those dark waters, the lessons came too late. Cape Matapan, the Trap March, 1941. The Mediterranean was Britain's lifeline to Egypt and beyond. Italian naval forces threatened British convoys constantly. Admiral Angelo Iachino commanded the Italian fleet with orders to intercept traffic south of Crete. His force included battleship Vittorio Veneto, 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 13 destroyers. What Iachino didn't know was that British cryptographers had decrypted Italian communications through Ultra. Admiral Sir Andrew Cunningham knew exactly where the Italians would be. He laid a trap of exquisite sophistication. Cunningham deliberately allowed Italian reconnaissance to spot 4 light cruisers under Vice Admiral Pridham Whipple, making them appear as the primary threat. These ships engaged Italian cruisers in a running battle that drew Iachino westward. Meanwhile, Cunningham's main force, 3 battleships and an aircraft carrier, steamed north completely undetected. On March 28th afternoon, torpedo bombers from HMS Formidable attacked. One torpedo struck heavy cruiser Polar, jamming her rudder and destroying her engines. She wallowed dead in the water. Iachino faced a command decision: abandon Polar or send help. Driven by tradition that you never abandon ships in distress, he made the fatal choice. Heavy cruisers Zara and Fiume with 4 destroyers were detached to assist. They sailed directly into Cunningham's battleships. The British had radar, the Italians did not. At approximately 10:30 p.m. in complete darkness, HMS Warspite, Valiant and Barham closed to less than 4,000 yards before opening fire. Searchlights illuminated Fiume. 15-inch shells from 3 battleships crashed into her simultaneously. The heavy cruiser disintegrated. Zara took similar punishment. Destroyers Vittorio Alfieri and Giosuè Carducci were smashed within minutes. The massacre lasted 5 minutes. 3 heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers were sinking. Approximately 2,300 Italian sailors were dead or dying. British casualties were negligible. At dawn, destroyers rescued about 900 Italian survivors. Crippled Polar was torpedoed after her crew evacuated. Cape Matapan exposed fundamental weaknesses. Italian ships lacked radar, putting them at catastrophic disadvantage in night actions. Their commanders relied on outdated intelligence. The decision to send Zara and Fiume to rescue Polar, while honorable, was tactically unsound. After Cape Matapan, Italian commanders became increasingly cautious, unwilling to risk fleet actions without guaranteed superiority. British convoys continued running the Mediterranean gauntlet with relative impunity. Hood, pride before the fall. She was magnificent. HMS Hood, launched in 1920, displaced 43,000 tons and mounted 8 15-inch guns. For 2 decades, she was the largest warship in the world, the symbol of Royal Navy supremacy, the pride of the fleet. She was also a death trap. Naval architects knew Hood's armor scheme was flawed. Designed during World War I for close-range engagements, her protection emphasized side armor. But modern battleships engaged at longer ranges where shells plunged downward, striking deck armor. Hood's deck protection was inadequate. Plans existed to modernize her armor, but modifications were expensive and time-consuming. In the late 1930s, the Admiralty made a fateful decision. Hood was needed at sea, not in dry dock. Modernization was postponed indefinitely. That decision would kill 1,400 men. May 1941, German battleship Bismarck had broken into the Atlantic. Every available British capital ship was mobilized. Hood, despite her age and vulnerabilities, was ordered to intercept. Vice Admiral Lancelot Holland commanded from Hood's Bridge with battleship HMS Prince of Wales as second. They made contact in Denmark Strait on May 24th morning. Holland approached from a direction, allowing Germans to concentrate fire on Hood. He closed range rapidly, hoping to minimize plunging fire danger. But Germans opened fire sooner than expected, with devastating accuracy. At 6:01 a.m., disaster struck. A 15-inch shell from Bismarck penetrated Hood's thin deck armor and detonated inside a main magazine. 112 tons of cordite propellant ignited instantaneously. The explosion was apocalyptic. The ship's back broke. Her stern rose impossibly high as the bow plunged. 3 minutes later, the pride of the Royal Navy disappeared. 1,415 men died. 3 survived. Hood's destruction exposed uncomfortable truths the Admiralty had ignored. The ship should never have been in that engagement. Her vulnerabilities were documented. Modern battleships should have led the interception. But Hood was faster, available, and carried the Royal Navy's prestige. Pride placed her in Denmark Strait, and pride killed her. Bismarck was caught and destroyed 3 days later, battered into a burning wreck before being scuttled. 5 battles, 5 disasters, 5 lessons written in blood and steel. The naval warfare that emerged would be unrecognizable to admirals who commanded battleship fleets just years before. Air power, radar, intelligence, and joint operations became paramount. The big gun ship became obsolete, but the sailors left a legacy beyond tactical lessons. They proved courage under fire defines naval tradition. They demonstrated technological superiority, and intelligence can overcome numerical disadvantages. And they showed commanders who fail to adapt will always pay the highest price. The age of the battleship died in these waters, and the world would never be the same.